page 365, Ois Gimel. This is the last, no, it's not next to the last Ois. We're learning the Maamar Halila Hashem B'chayai, and the last thing that Rebbe explained was the difference between meridus and ahava, frustration, and the mode of frustration versus the mode of simcha, and the difference between ava and yira. So let's go on, and because he's still in the middle of that thought. However, kol zeh hayischalkus b'meridus v'simcha v'ava v'yira. These differences that we explained earlier between frustration and simcha, and between love and yira, ava and yira, the be'eshahu b'meridus. And he repeats his point that he's emphasizing. You see how he wants to really say it again and again. That during the time of meridus, ein shayach klal le'inyan simcha. It's not only that he doesn't have simcha, he's not able to relate to simcha. Ein shayach klal. On the contrary, hasimcha meisefes tuka al meridosai. Simcha at that time adds upsetness to his meridus. In other words, what Moshe? What?
The word tuga. What is that word?
I believe the word means upsetness, anger, upsetness. It makes you more upset. I think there's a word, tuga, in Chazal they bring it in the Gemara, like a taina, an argument, you know. So when you're frustrated and someone tries making you happy, you know, besimcha, or you try, it doesn't work and it gets you more upset. That's what he means. Uve'eshu besimcha, and conversely, when you are in the mode of simcha, ein shayach le'inyan meridus. You're at that time not shayach to meridus, to frustration. You're totally besimcha. You can't hear any notion of simcha. Ki ein shum davar teifes. I'm sorry, you can't hear any notion of frustration. Ki ein shum davar teifes makim, because at that time nothing is valuable legabe toiv hahu shehu bai, compared to the good that you're into at that time. You're in the mode Moshe of simcha, and you're totally besimcha. That's all you know about. And anything outside of simcha, you don't hear. That's what he says. So even if you're trying to interject a frustration mode to give you an extra high, it doesn't work because you are in simcha mode. Says the Rebbe, this is all when we're talking about the revealed powers, the koyches hagiluyim. In other words, the state of being in which your koyach, your attribute, your emotion, your feeling is active. But there's something Chasidus says called koyches atzmiyim, the essential koyches, banefesh, which are rooted in his soul. Hare einam biskalkus, they're not divided. Now let me explain. Chasidus says there are various aspects to koyches. There's something called koyches hagiluyim, the revealed koyches, and koyches atzmiyim, the essential koyches. In other words, let's say the koyach of chesed. There is the chesed as the chesed manifests itself. The manifestation of a chesed depends on the environment, depends on your mood, and depends on who you are. Whereas the koyches atzmiyim, this is not created by the outside stimuli, i.e. the environment, the other person, the situation. Rather, it's who you are inside. We call that koyches atzmiyim. So, a proof to this Chasidus brings is that at a time of a wedding of a child, someone who's usually frugal is very expansive. How could that be? Normally we see this person is acting, in a frugal way. But yet the person splurges. What happened? What happened is at the time of a simchas of a child, it touches the essence, the koyach, the way the koyach is in its essence. And the koyach in its essence is not frugal. It's not frugal and it's not spendthrift. It's basically essential. So if the simcha is so great and the expansion becomes so great, that's one of the proofs that it brings. Another proof, for example, if someone is pinned under a car, you will find that there are people that are able to actually pick the car up to somewhat and unpin them. How could that be? They don't look like a bodybuilder, because there's a koyach atzmi of saving a life that's very deeply rooted in the person. So these are examples, and there are many more examples of koyachas atzmiyim. So the Rebbe says, when we're talking about koyachas atzmiyim, there's no ischalkus. There's no division between merirus and simcha, and ava and yira. It's all one tnuah. It's all one notion. Let's continue. Let's see what he says. V'im heyesam mitzad etzem uhusam. Now this is a rhetorical remark. You got Moshe. I need you to pay attention, because this is deep stuff here, and if you lose train of thought, you're going to be lost. The rhetorical mark, v'im heyesam, denotes a rhetorical question. And although mitzad etzem or husam, if you look at their very essence, hey mafochem zeh mizeh. In other words, like this: when you talk about the activity of the koyach, you can argue and you can explain there are two positions of the activity of the koyach. But the fact is, the koyach itself, without its activity, Shmuel, either it's ava or it's yira, either it's love or fear, either it's simcha or merirus. So that's his rhetorical remark. He says, I understand that there is the koyach in a manifested state, and there is the koyach in an essential state in the person's being, but nevertheless, ava is ava and yira is yira. Love is love. What are you telling me? Love is fear. Fear is love. I mean, it's two different feelings. That's his question. Avalim zeh, this is the retort to his rhetorical question. Avalim zeh, hari yecholim liyay shneim ke'echad. Nevertheless, he says, you're right. But the fact is that if the expression of the etzem is in a way called koyachas atzmiyim, they can both be expressed simultaneously. They can both be together. I always say the story to explain this is with the famous chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he actually was a baby in his crib when the Alter Rebbe saw him, and was a chassid was a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rashab, and he saw the previous Rebbe in his crib. So this chassid saw 6 Rebbes, 6 Lubavitcher Rebbes. He lived to his late 80s or 90s, so he had a Riches Yomim. His name was Reb Peretz Chaim. There's a Lubavitcher family Chaim, and there are many of them that are named Peretz Chaim. There's a shliach, I think, in Harvard or a university is called Peretz Chaim. He's on campus somewhere. Well, his ancestor way back was Peretz Chaim, this chassid that I'm telling you about. He was also a Rav in the city of Chernigov. Okay. So this Peretz Chaim, Hasidim saw a very unusual thing about his face. They saw that in one eye he was crying when he would daven and learn whatever he was, and in the other eye he was smiling. So they asked him, Reb Peretz, how is this possible? So he said, it's possible because it says in Zohar HaKadosh, and the Alter Rebbe brings it in at the end of chapter 34 in Tanya, joy is inserted, is plugged in, is connected to this side, and crying and tears is in the other side. In other words, I'm not schizophrenic. There is one part of the person, one eye that is full of simcha. And at the very same time, the other eye is full of meridus. And I tell you that I saw this in the Rebbe. How did I see this in the Rebbe? The Rebbe, one moment at a Farbrengen can be so elated and so freilach and so lively, and then he starts talking and he chokes up and he can't talk because he's crying and he's so upset about Russian Jews or about Mashiach not coming. How is this one person, okay, so there it wasn't simultaneous, but the answer is the koiches atzmiyim don't have ischalkus. The koiches atzmiyim, if the pa'ula, I want to make myself clear, if the activity that you're doing is coming from the essential koiches, not for what's called the manifested koiches, then they go together. And you could be crying and laughing at the same time. You could be loving and fearing at the same time. That's what he says here. But, what does love feel like? And what does fear feel like? It's two different feelings. So regarding what the feelings are, I think this is being clear now. What the feelings are, there's a difference between love and fear. But the way the feelings express themselves, there is a position, depending on where it comes from, what you're expressing at the time. If it's what we call koiches atzmim, your essential koiches, then they can come simultaneously together. That's why it's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction to say that there's two different feelings, and absolutely there are, but how they're expressed could be simultaneous. That's what he says here. Oh, look, and he quotes what I quoted earlier. Ukemaimer, as the saying is, in Zoyar, Chedvot kia biliboi misitra do. Chedvot is joy. This is Aramaic. It's from the Zoyar. Tkiya is inserted. Takua. It's knocked in. It's plugged in. Biliboi in the heart. Misitra do from one side. Uvechia and tears, crying. Tkiya is inserted. Biliboi in the heart. Misitra do from the other side. Shameridus vasimcha bo is kecho, that the meridus, the frustration and the simcha come simultaneously. Rabbi Akiva, when Rabbi Akiva heard secrets of the Torah from his teacher, Rabbi Lezer HaGadol, Zolgu ein of Demois, his eyes teared up, right? And they were dripping with tears. V'hinei hademois bois besibus kibbutz halev v'amoyach. Why do tears come? They come. The reason is besibas kibbutz halev v'amoyach, the shriveling of the heart and the mind. The mind and the heart can't contain it anymore, so at that time it expresses itself in tears. Yes, Hillel.
Can you talk about this word kibbutz? What's an unusual word?
Kibbutz, I believe, is a Hebrew word. Mitkavetz, it means shrivels up, tightens up.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I know. The whole kibbutz who besibas meridus. Rebbe says, why do you have kibbutz? Good morning, Yoni. Why do you have kibbutz? Kibbutz. It comes because you get so upset that the brain can't handle it anymore. It's too much for the brain, and it's too much for the heart. So they kind of they can't expand anymore. On the contrary, they go into themselves. Kibbutz, they go into themselves, and what happens? And they get upset. And he says in Yiddish, "Atifa nit good kite." When one experiences a deep no goodness, unafa bitter kite, and a very frustrating, bitter thing. When someone experiences something very bitter, very upsetting, etc. Someone who hears something that's no good, God forbid, or has great pain, that his heart and his mind can't receive it, can't handle it. The heart and the mind shrivel up. The ein of zolgus demois, and their eyes drip with tears. In Yiddish, as verquetscht in dem Herz. Yeah, that's the Yiddish word, verquetscht. You heard of the word quetsch, Yoni, right? A quetsch. Verquetscht means the heart tightens up, right? So when someone says, oy vey, and oy vey, and oy vey this, and oy vey that, that's a verquetschkeit. It's a notion of shriveling up and not being expansive, and when it gets to a point where you can't handle anymore, because normally, Hillel, your mind can handle it and filter it, and your heart can handle it and filter it. But if it gets too much, they can't, so you go into yourself. That's what verquetschkeit means. As verquetscht in dem Herz, his heart quetsches him, weint, and it bothers him so much that he cries. The sages say about Rebbi Akiva, Libay kipischoi shel ulam. His heart was like the opening of the ulam in the Mishkan. It was a broad heart. Elo, shezeu hamerirus habo mitzad hasimchu v'ha'oinik. So here's the question. If the Gemara says that the heart of Rebbi Akiva was kipischa shel ulam, how is it that he cried? Right up, look a few lines before. It says, when he heard the secrets, when Rebbi Akiva heard the secrets of Torah from his teacher, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, his eyes teared and cried. But wait a minute. And the answer is that this crying was not morbidity, was not depression. Rather, it was a frustration that came mitzad hasimcha ve'oinik. You're so happy that you cry. You know how someone, when you have an experience, you haven't seen someone for years, you hug them, you're with them, and many times you cry, right? Why are you crying? You didn't see your friend in 40 years, and you didn't think he survived the war, or something else. Someone came out now from COVID, and you never thought that it'd come out, and you give him a hug, and you start crying. Why are you crying? That's coming from a simcha. The simcha is so great that the heart and mind can't contain it, and it comes out in tears. So those are joyful tears. They're tears, literal tears. And I don't know, but sometimes I look at the Rebbe's video, and sometimes I get sad, like, I knew what this is, I lived it, and I don't have it, so it makes me upset, and I cry. And then other times I see such joy in the same video, I cry too, but I'm crying from simcha. So there are two ideas to crying and tears. One is from the upset side and probably depressive side, and one is from the healthy side. And this is something that I don't know. In America, it seems like it's like a big taboo. Like, what are you crying? I remember I gave a shiur to the women in Or Chaya in Yerushalayim about 15 years ago. And I forget what I was talking about. It was women, girls, students. And I shared a story, and it was very emotional, so I cried. And after the shiur, a woman that came over to me says, "Rabbi, why are you crying?" I couldn't explain what I'm going to explain now in the middle of the shiur. Why? That's what happened. I just started to... But I saw that they weren't kalim. They weren't vessels. Especially, if I may say so, the women, it's like, it brings out, they start crying too. Some of them, and it gets very emotional. But even for men, it's so unusual here. The truth is, when you learn Chasidus and you learn Torah in general, I remember Rabbi Fischel Hershkowitz, who was a dayan in the Kloisenberg community, and he spoke at a Yutas Kislev Masiba like you have at Binyanei Umah. We had here in Borough Park at a big hall, and he spoke about the Baal Shem Tov. And when he mentioned the Heilige, they say Heilig, not Heilig, the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, the Holy Baal Shem Tov, he just started to sob. Why? It's Yutas Kislev. There's 2,000 people. He has the podium. He's, it's light, it's bright, it's gewaldig, it's a chagiga for Chasidus. And here's a man standing there and sobbing about when he mentions the Baal Shem Tov. And it hit me, and I was there. And I paid attention to what's going on here. It's tears of joy, but it's tears. It's not. I didn't walk away saying, "Oh, he's crying because he doesn't have the Baal Shem Tov now, 200 years later." Oh, wake up, duh. We're in Golas. So why are you crying? The answer is, it's Simcha Shel Mitzvah. And it's sometimes with the Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and the Tainug is so powerful, you express it through tears. That's what he says here. The Rebbi Akiva, let's back into the text. The Rebbi Akiva, hoye loy chush toiv. Rebbi Akiva had a good chush, a good talent. B'yoyser, a very good one. B'soides HaTorah, in understanding the secrets of Torah. When he heard the secrets that Rabbi Eliezer taught him, he had great pleasure. Look at what he says. And from that itself, came the shriveling and the frustration, which is not in the essential level, meaning that in the essence of this experience, there's no division between the tears and the joy. That's what he means. When you experience this, Moshe Myers, when you experience this feeling, this level, this koiches atzmiyim, then you can't, it makes sense. You can either cry, you can either laugh, because it's not coming from, it's not being prompted and it's not being generated by the outside. It's generated in you. And if it's generated in you, depending on what you're feeling at the time, that's what you're going to express. Hainu, and he says, he's skalus beliku. Yes.
I read it a little differently right ahead of you. I just want to say what you think of the kashish masodas Torah. Shegilo the Rabbi Eliezer hayala oneg gadol meod. He had this great delight. Umezeh guf abah hakivut among umahamariros machahu ehu be'etzem mahus madregazet. But he himself, Rebbi Akiva, recognized himself as not being at that madrega. That's why I read it first. I wonder what you think.
But wait. Based on your reading, so how do you explain the flow?
So the flow would be that he was exposed to these exalted teachings, and then he saw himself as not on a madrega, not being a kli, able to be makabel.
No.
Okay.
I listen. I'll maybe check with someone Shabbos and Shul, bli neder, but I don't think that's the pshat.
Okay.
I think the mashahu is going on the koiches atzmiyim. That it's a continuation of his dialogue in the paragraph, which is overall making the difference between koiches atzmiyim, koiches hagiluyim. So in koiches hagiluyim, you couldn't have the two come together, but in koiches atzmiyim you can. I think that's the pshat. Let's learn a few more lines and see. Maybe let's see what it says. Hainu bihiskalus belikus. When do you experience this? When did Rebbi Akiva experience this? When he was incorporated, hitkalalut, bielikus, in godliness. And he says in Yiddish, oisgein in getlichkeit. It literally means to melt in godliness, to be consumed in godliness. So Rabbi Akiva, when he was learning Chasidus HaTorah, the secrets of Torah, he melted away. What happens when you melt away? Shmuel, what happens? Your rational thought and your feelings melt away. So there is the way we approach any situation with our cup and our heart. That's giluyim, koychas hagiluyim. But when Rebbi Akiva went into the mode of Chasidus HaTorah, that all melted away, he was now included in the godliness, and from God's perspective, from Hashem's perspective, there's no difference between the manifestation of simcha or merirus. That's what I think he's saying here. So that's why, when he learned Chasidus HaTorah, he cried. It's a very interesting pshat here. I never saw it this way. Now I'm hearing it very differently. In other words, why does the Gemara say that when he learned Chasidus HaTorah, he came to this feeling? Well, what about when the Gemara says that Rebbi Akiva would darshan on each crown? You know the famous Gemara, right? On the crowns of the Sefer Torah, Moshe, you know, right? In the letters, the Tagim. Why doesn't it say, Moshe, that when he expounded the Tagim, he had this feeling of, and he cried? Zol Gudemois. It doesn't say that. It says that specifically when he was makabel the secrets of Torah from his Rebbe Elazar Agadol, right? There's Agadol. That's when he cried. So I think the pshat is, and what he's saying here, the Rebbe is really clarifying it, because when you get to a state of Chasidus HaTorah, so then you're vacating the observable and the understandable, and you're going into a different realm. You're being taken into a different realm, and in that realm, there's no difference. And that's why he cried, and it was tears of joy. Whereas you know, kind of when he was learning and darshaning the Tagim, it wasn't Chasidus HaTorah. It was in Nigla the Torah. It was, yes, a medrash and a drash and on the Tagim, but it wasn't Chasidus HaTorah. Anyway, just a thought. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, Chevre, we're going to stop here. It's Yud Beis Tammuz Sunday, so maybe we'll fabreng a little bit. We should fabreng either Sunday or Monday. We want to get some more people to the shiur, so if you know that the timing would work better at 1:15 or 1:30, tell me. You know, I spoke to Reb Shloima. He has no problem changing the time. I have no problem.
I can't really. I usually daven at the 1:20 minyan, so that would not work for me to change it.
Oh, okay. So that wouldn't work for you. Okay. Yeah. And what time does the 1:20 minyan finish?
Usually about 1:40. I get back home at 1:45.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not jumping because I see one of the few people who said they're not really committed to coming to each shiur. So we'll leave it for now. Anyway, have a great Shabbos, a great Yud Beis Tammuz, Hatzlach and everything. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.